everyone.
Oh, wow. Look at this amazing Zoom grid. Welcome, everyone.
Wow, this is amazing.
Oh, I just love seeing the numbers go up. Just look at that number go. 31.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, my God. Hey, this is brilliant. 35. Boom, boom. Oh, it's the first time I see Zoom with so many pages. You actually have to click on the arrow to see everyone.
Yep.
Ah, this is gorgeous.
Bring my banana. Okay.
Where are speakers? I'm trying to find our speakers. There's Andre, there's Sandy,
and there's Robert in the car.
Ooh, nice. Oh, this is incredible.
Should we give it one more minute?
Yeah, let's just give people one more minute, just assuming some people might have forgotten to install Zoom or some other difficulties. Just a quick exercise, really curious about this. Oh, please open up the chat in Zoom and quickly just drop like an indicator where you're tuning from. City, country, continent, just let us know. Let's just see where you folks all are joining from.
Andy Davis, I like your background.
Wow. Great setup, Andy. Austin, Texas, Hamburg, Budapest, Fort Knox. Oh, Fort Worth, sorry. Milan.
Okay.
Wow. Francie. This is brilliant. Keep on coming.
Malaysia.
Okay. Welcome. Singapore must be quite late. So happy to see such a huge spread on the globe. This is great. Oh, there's Sabrina. Hey, Sabrina.
Hey, Sabrina.
Oh, this is
hello. Nice to see you.
Likewise. Okay, perfect.
Should we kick it off?
Yeah, let's kick it off. Welcome, everyone. Super excited to have everyone tune in. Glad that we're able to take 1 hour of your time and talk about remote work. We're super grateful. We didn't expect to get a sold out first set of registrations. We put a cap at 300, but then we got so many messages of people who wanted to join. This is great. So yeah, let's get started. My name is Raz.
And I'm Anna.
And we're gonna be your host for this session. And along ourselves, we'll have 3 other amazing speakers that are here to drop some really, really valuable knowledge on remote work. They're people who are doing this for a living, or people who are experts in this field. And together with us, we hope to give you a pretty good set of knowledge, best practices, and resources that you can take back to your teams and companies to facilitate, to help you in facilitating your remote work sessions. Let's go for a quick round of introductions. I think that is in order. As I mentioned, my name is Raz, and alongside Anna, we are the founders of Just Mad. We're a product design consultancy from the heart of Transylvania, the land of Dracula, as some of you might know it. We are a fully remote company who runs workshops of various kinds for various types of industries. We do things like design sprints, strategy workshops, growth sprints, and most of them are remote. And we also train people on how to do these things themselves. And yeah, next up, I want to give this virtual microphone that's in the set to our other speakers, starting with Sandy. If you could tell everyone about the magic that you're doing.
The magic. I wish I had that.
Oh, you have it.
My name is. Thank you. Hi, my name is Sandy, and I'm from Leipzig, Germany. Oh, I'm based in Leipzig, Germany, and I'm working for a company called Software AG. And our team are basically pretty much remote. So, I mean, we do have offices, but then our team are not really all sitting in the same office. So we practice remote work a lot. And also I help Robert during the global virtual design sprint a lot, where we basically coordinate with few hundreds of participants all around the world doing virtual design sprint remote. Doing virtual design sprint. I wanted to say virtual design sprint remotely. But yeah, that's me. Andre.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandy, for talking about remote design sprints virtually. Andre, if you could hop on and grab the microphone for a second.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Andre. Nice to meet you. I'm I'm Andre. I'm from a company called Deep Work. At least that's my company. I used to work at AJ and Smart before. I guess a bunch of you know that. We put together all these certificates, training courses and stuff. And about late 2017, I decided to take everything that we learned and put it remote. And then that's basically what I'm doing right now. And I'm super happy to share everything I know and like try to help you guys make the world a better place, because that's, I hope, what we're all kind of trying to do.
Thank you, Andre. And now to our Formula One, since it's popular starting tomorrow. Robert, if you could grab the microphone and make sure to drive safe while you do so, and tell us a little bit about yourself if you want to.
Sure. So we're going to continue the magic from the inside of my car. So I'm really actually doing the remote thing. In fact, I'm literally proving the point that what we're trying to do today. So my name is Robert Scrove. I am the person behind Dallas Design Sprints and the Global Virtual Design Sprint. I apologize if it's going to break up a bit, but I'm dealing with remote, so it happens. Most of my time is spent consulting and advising people on how to implement remote strategies. So I do a lot of talking with different companies, agencies that are doing remote sprints or design sprints, people who are suddenly remote or just are used to physically going to places and doing their workshops. There's a critical need for the conversation in this space on how to make that jump. And that's why I'm joining Roz and Anna today, as well as with Sandy and Andre, to basically talk about this space, give some best practices, and really help a lot of people where they're experiencing a lot of pain. So I'll be shortly out of this car in a minute, but I just figured it was good for the theme of what we're doing here today. So take it away, Roz, and then I'm going to go back on mute.
Drive safe, Robert. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. So now just a few housekeeping items before we kick it off. Here's what to expect from this session. We're going to provide a set of best practices and recommendations, as well as resources that will assist you in your remote facilitation efforts, whether you're driving meetings or workshops remotely. Even if you're new to this or you're just looking to level up your skills, we've got you covered. So I'm going to share my screen and talk a bit, just a second, talk a bit about the format. I'm just going to look at the screen here, over here, because we have a Miro board.
Yes, hold on just a second.
Yeah.
There we go. I'm just going to share the screen and let us know if everyone can see it. First and foremost. There we go. Let's close this up.
Okay. Please let us know if you can see the screen. So I'm just gonna cover a bit the format of this conversation. What you see here is going to be a visual summary of the session. And as we will progress to the conversation, we will be filling this board with key takeaways and resources. So we have 5 main topics that we would like to cover. And these are preparation, facilitation, communication, tools, and lastly, some resources. This resource will be available to you after the event, along with the recording, so you can share this with your team, with your company, or anyone that you might believe that can benefit from it. Also, make sure you drop your questions in Zoom, because we will centralize them and we're going to put them here. And at the end of the session, we'll try to cover all of them.
Exactly. So basically what we're trying to do here is we're gonna create this artifact that you can take and analyze and come back to whenever you feel like you need some guidance on some of the topics that we talk about. Okay?
Okay,
perfect.
Without further ado, I'm gonna give the mic to Raz, and he will talk about preparation.
Perfect. All right. Wow. As much as I'm gonna say this at every single topic, I'm 100% sure that I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna say every little piece of content that we're gonna share here is important. Everything is critical. Everything is important. Now, obviously, I'm talking from my own personal experience when I say that preparation is literally the most crucial part of anything that you do, especially in a context of a remote work session. It's like the foundation that you need for a house. Whatever you're doing after the foundation is built, if that base is not steady and you're not doing a good job at making it strong, every effort that you do afterwards is basically going to be futile. And we've learned this, I would say, the hard way, because when we started running design sprints remotely, that was the biggest lesson that we got, because we just jumped right into it. We didn't do any preparation. We just took Jake Knapp's book, we opened it up at the recipe, and just said, you know what, we're just gonna go with it. And it was, like, in full honesty, it was a complete disaster, because there are certain challenges involved with working remote. And as much as we all know the benefits, and I think if I give everyone a chance to talk about all the benefits, we can talk for an entire hour, but we also have to think about the pitfalls of remote work. And what we're trying to do in this session is try to check most of them off the list and try to provide solutions. And when it comes to preparation, it is really, really, really critical to think about what kind of session you're going to have. So if you think about remote work and you think about the types of sessions that you can have, they range from just meetings, just a simple meeting where you want to give an update, or you want to talk about priorities, or maybe it's a workshop like a design sprint or a strategy workshop or an ideation workshop. No matter what that is, preparation is key. And now what I like to do is to address a few questions to our panelists. And I will start with Robert, if you can hear us, kind of share a little bit of your experience with preparing for remote sessions. What does that look like for you? What are the typical things that you do when you think about preparation?
With remote sessions, it usually starts from the ground up. And what I mean by that is that you have to make sure that everyone's on the same page around their network capability, the tools that they're using, the expectations that the session has of them, as well as their own time, and not putting a lot of assumption into the mix. So I'll start from the very beginning. And that for networking, you really can't be remote unless your network is solid, meaning that you can connect to the web, or if you connect to the internet, you have a reliable connection. You're using software that is updated and that's not going to give you a hiccup or disconnect you when you can. I always try to encourage people to go through a trial run of some type so that you can see if there's anything on your system that needs updating, or you can know well in advance if you're going to have join a session without video, so that you're not necessarily going to be bandwidth deprived. The other is that if everyone's working off of a particular software set, say if everyone's using Miro or Miro in terms of whiteboarding, making sure that you have some sort of shortcut in your desktop or someplace where you can get to it easily. And the other is having, and though I think I didn't mention it before, but having some sort of ground rules that everyone understands in terms of communication, professional candor, making sure that everyone gives everyone the benefit of the doubt when it comes to speaking their point of view, that everything is on a schedule. As long as you level set and sync everyone on the basics for communication and otherwise, you should be in pretty good shape. But the amount of time you should allocate for preparation, if you're a facilitator or someone that's going to be kind of administering or advising or managing a session, you should give yourself, for me, I usually give myself a full week. And it's not that I'm going to work every day on the preparation, but you start the conversation early. You can surface problems that normally would occur in the session really fast, both on the technical and the software and the expectation side, and everybody will be better off. So I usually recommend at least a full week from the date that you're going to be starting your session.
Perfect. Thank you, Robert. And we fully support that. And this is what we do every single time when we do remote design sprints. We always have a week of prep where we do all of the things that we believe are critical to preparing for the session. So this includes, and we're going to have a separate conversation on tools, but I just want to mention this for a quick second. Especially for those of you who are suddenly remote and just have to quickly adapt to this new way of working. Tools are really critical, and choosing the right tools is a separate conversation we're going to have. But in the preparation phase, what we do is we make sure, as Robert mentioned, that people get a trial run and people are trained on how to use the tool. This is critical. This is absolutely necessary, because if you're working all day in like a visual collaboration platform like Miro, for example, you cannot expect that everyone that's going to join the session will inherently know how to use it. So this is one of the key components that we look at when we do remote preparation. Something else that I found really useful whenever kind of switching context a lot is people have have a difficulty in translating their usual in-person activities to remote environments. The design sprint is again a really good example, because that was meant to be an in-person process all along. It was all about bringing people in the same room, giving them a set of exercises to run, having a whiteboard, we could just fill it up with sticky notes and toss some voting dots on it and get work done. But when going remote, you don't have the luxury of people's physical presence. So you have to translate all of those exercises in the sprint in a way that is achievable for remote environments. So that's something that we do every time, because even when we work with our clients, they have some the classic design thinking methodologies that they use. Maybe they run a press release exercise, or they do how might we generation. So all of those things need to be translated into a digital format. And when we're talking about resources, we're going to share some of those. But yeah, thank you, Robert. Some really great points there. Sandy, what are your thoughts? What do you think are some important things to look at when preparing for remote sessions?
Yeah, I think Robert already covered lots, but I would also stress on the time zone difference. I think that is something that a lot of us would miss because we just are so used to live in our environments, just a very easy, even just using the language, like saying good morning or good afternoon. Like we often, it's our morning and say, hey, good morning, but then actually it's at night on the other side of the world. So that is something that we also have to pay attention to. So trying to synchronize like what is the overlap between different time zones. And sometimes that also means that we have to be more flexible than usual. Just like today, I had to be more flexible for the Asian time zone. So I had to wake up like at 5 o'clock and do a section with them. So these things can happen. We just need to communicate better to accommodate each one of us. So yeah.
Great point, Sandy. And this just raised the red flag in my head. Scheduling. Scheduling is critical, because when you're in the same office, it's so easy to just email someone or just go into their office and say, hey, we're going to have this meeting tomorrow at 10. Is that okay? Yeah, sure. Just going to let me check my calendar. Should be fine. But remotely, again, we're going to cover this in the tools component, but just some tools that we use in order to make sure we align people's schedules. Because for example, we had a design sprint where we had people tuning in from Australia, Singapore, Germany, and we were in Romania. So this was literally a larger spectrum of time zones. And we really wanted to be completely aware of other people's schedules, because 8 a.m. for me could be great, but that could mean a really late hour for someone else, specifically in Singapore. So scheduling is really important, and making sure that you align people really effectively. And we do this by using a really nice combination of tools called Doodle. If you've seen them, we basically can create a larger spectrum of time slots, and people can pick and choose the ones that they want. We will link this in the Miro board. And 2 is World Time Buddy, which basically allows you to create multiple rows that you can basically compare time zones and kind of find alignment for everyone. So yeah, great addition, Sandy. And Andre, is there something you want to add? I see, hold on just a second. I see something in the chat. People would like to get the board. Yes.
I accidentally said yep, but then I remembered that this is a resource that we're going to share with you at the end of the webinar.
Exactly. So we're going to share this board with you. We're kind of filling in the details as the speakers are talking. Hope that's okay. Andre, anything you'd like to add on the preparation front? Something that you'd like to add? And everyone, feel free, if you have questions, this is the time to add them in the Zoom chat if you have questions specifically related to preparation, and we will make sure to add them in the board.
Yeah, I guess I'll quickly finish up this round. Thanks a lot, everyone. I definitely agree with everything that you guys said. A lot of it, basically everything, overlaps with my experience. The week prep is quite interesting because it allows you time to do some pre-research as well. So at AJ and Smart, we used to actually spend a couple of days on really going into people and like doing interviews before an actual project would start. And you can do a lot of things. You can onboard the team in that week. You can just generally dive into the technology if needed. So that's a really good time frame to get familiarized with what you're working on. Another thing that I find kind of important, or like just pretty specific example, I send out always a prep email to every team that collaborates with us on a kind of new basis, which contains basically what's going to happen exactly, maybe some examples of the outcomes, kind of a note that the whole experience will be counterintuitive because a lot of people are getting thrown into an environment that they're not familiar with. So you want to kind of preempt that fear and calm them down. It's kind of the same with the design sprint in general. Jay Knapp repeats it a lot of times. I think that, you know, you want to convince your people that they should trust the process because it feels so strange. So convince your clients or your customers to trust it because it will be fine and it will work out because it's actually not that different from real life. So the prep email, just, you know, write up a template and then reuse that. And what also kind of was helpful to put in that email is to make sure that everybody signs up for the tools, because when you're time boxing the sessions, when you're actually working together, you're basically running out of time if someone didn't sign up. So a lot of times people came in and they were like, oh, I don't have the login for my Miro. And they're like, why not? And so it takes like a half an hour then to onboard them, even though you could have just sent out a link or like double check that everybody's really signed up for Miro, Zoom, and Slack and whatever you need. So make sure all of these tools are there and people actually know these tools, because a lot of people don't even know Slack, depending on industry. I think that's it for me for the preparation. There's obviously more, but I could talk for hours.
Yeah, I guess we could all, like, I mean, depends on your time that you have. You could also schedule like a one-on-one with each participants just to check they have everything ready. So just check their login, check their software, and see if they have any questions.
Yeah, that is super important.
Yeah, some really great questions you have in there, folks. Okay, let's move on to our second topic, which is facilitation, and I'll let Anna take this one.
I guess that facilitation plays a super important role, and we see the facilitator role kind of like the orchestrator. So we see this person taking care of everything and make sure that the session will run smoothly. There's an analogy that we use quite often. We think about the facilitator as Danny Ocean from Ocean 11. Yeah, the person taking care of everything. Now, there's an obvious difference between running on-site versus remote sessions. There's a different level of engagement. In a room, you can actually see people, you can feel them, you can see what they do, if they're on their phone or not. Online, there are so many things that could go wrong in a second, so you have to be very careful with that. And on top of that, you have to make sure you're keeping the engagement level up. And we know after running so many remote sessions that can be very tricky. So remote facilitation can be quite complex, but not impossible. There are some things as a facilitator that you can do, and there are some things that you also should take into account. So for example, you have to pay attention to the company culture or to the team's culture. This is super important. Then you have to assess the team's skill set and see if they're ready to use a tool such as Miro or anything else. Understand that there's a learning curve for some tools and for some processes. You have to make sure that you make everything super clear. And most importantly, well, what we found to be very useful is to use visual support whenever you have a session. No matter if it's a meeting, if it's a workshop, use visual support in order to, you know, make sure that they have a clear understanding of the outcome of the process and of the tasks that they need to do. Now, I'm going to invite Andre on the virtual mic. Andre, would you like to share some tips and tricks on facilitation?
Yay! All right, this is a big one because there's also obviously a lot of different things on facilitation. I love this research that Google did, I think 5 years ago. It's called Project Aristotle, where they basically tried to learn what makes the best team and what makes the best team collaborate and produce the best results. It's a great article. Just Google it. But the end result, or like one of the end results, is basically that there's two heuristics. One of them is that all of the people in the most successful teams communicated approximately the same amount. So every single individual said approximately the same amount. And the other thing is that they were all empathic, so they understood each other's emotions. Why I'm saying this in the topic of facilitation is because it's kind of your role as a facilitator to make sure that these rules apply. So whatever workshop setting you have, you want to make everybody comfortable so that everybody contributes more or less the same amount, or at least feels like they can contribute as much as they want. And at the same time, obviously also check that, you know, everybody is on the same thread. You're on video, so you can, yes, Project Aristotle, that's what it's spelled. Someone just wrote it in the comments. So whatever you see on the camera, it's kind of your responsibility to assess their state of mind. And sometimes, and actually a lot of times, what you see on the face is not what you think the person feels. So images are only like,
exactly,
especially without context, images are very like half true, because depending on culture, people have different facial expressions for specific emotions. And it's kind of your task to figure out what's the context. Like, is that person actually listening, or are they disagreeing? And most of the time they're actually listening. So I think a lot of times in the beginning, I was quite unsure and like a bit afraid that people might be misunderstanding me, but actually they were just focusing and concentrating on what I was saying. And that's quite important to keep in mind, because, you know, we're taught that facial expressions are universal, but it's, you know, as a facilitator, that's kind of important to pick up. Another thing is, and that's, I get like a lot of feedback on this, and guys, stop me if I ramble too long. But the other thing is music. So there's a lot of things that.
Go on.
Huh? Okay. So in the workshops that we did, or like that I've done over the last years in a physical space, we would feel like there's something missing when people would only write things down. So we put up a speaker and turn out some chill music, and it was fine. And it was like, now it's a comfortable session. And we started doing that in the remote sessions as well. And that proved to be almost like exponentially more interesting. And you can actually do that in Zoom. So if you have Zoom, you can go on share screen, and then on the, you can select, I think there's like several tabs, and you can basically only stream your music. Take out your favorite focusing playlist. Oh yeah, the Agent Smart one is really good. I can also drop one later and that I use, or like it's kind of a mix, an extended one. But yeah, that's a killer, especially for a killer in a positive way, especially for the bits where nothing really happens, or like where nobody's really talking. I don't think we humans are comfortable with that for some reason, and so that calms everyone down. Another thing is always to show examples when you're facilitating, and that's something that I remember from always. Again, to the topic of, you know, trust the process. A lot of people might not be familiar with what's going on, so you have to really show them like what the next 30 minutes of strangely focused alone work is going to have for an outcome, and that it is going to have an outcome, that it is going to be contributing to a bigger picture, that it is going to make, in the end, the whole product or project succeed. And if you keep repeating that, they'll basically on your side always, because they also want you to succeed. Yeah, and I think a lot more goes into like communication. I'm just looking at other notes. Does anybody else want to chime in?
I want
Yes,
to add
Robert, Andy,
oh, sorry.
Sandy.
Sure. Yeah, I just
go
want to add a note on the music part. So I have experienced also that some of the participants actually would find it distracting to have the music in the room or in the Zoom. And I would actually every time ask before, or yeah, just ask if they actually prefer music or not, because yeah, different people have different preferences. That's kind of just my experience.
Yeah, that's true. I sometimes just do it, and then someone says that the song sucks, and then I delete it out of the playlist. Never do it again.
Yeah, and I think the other is also, yeah, control the environment as well, because a lot of people may have noisy background, and it's better to just ask if they could mute themselves. But if they still don't do it, I think it's the facilitator's responsibility to actually mute that person so the rest of the team can still move on.
One thing I would add here, is probably regarding around engagement. I actually seen a question in the chat box, but we will answer these towards the end. But this is a really great point, as we often get this question like, how do you manage people's engagement remotely? How do you know that one, they are contributing to the cause and whatever we're doing? Two, how are you making sure that they're not distracted or are completely confused? And three, how do you signal that? It's a great question in the chat. How do you signal that without making them feel targeted or awkward? So in terms of engagement, what we do is we always ask people to turn their camera on, simply because we can see whether they're like squinting at the screen and knowing what to do. So kind of pick that up as a good facilitator. Then something else that we do when you're going remote, it's super easy to switch tabs. Like you could simply just go to a completely different tab and do something else. And it's hard for you as a facilitator to see that. It's like people looking at their phones during a meeting. Then third, how to make sure that you signal that you see that people are probably confused or they're not contributing enough. What we do is we go one-on-one and just in a private chat, make sure to communicate and tell them, hey, is everything okay? Do you need any help? Right. So this is kind of like the way we approach it.
Yeah, that's very valuable. That's also one thing that I wanted to mention. If you see that someone's definitely drifting off or like not listening, there's one thing that's like, you can ask them a question, which is a little bit of a kind of a dick move, but depends on the personality. Sometimes it works, or like sometimes it's appropriate. And if that's too much, you can also just mention their name, because, or like in some context without really talking at them, because mentioning their name will immediately wake them up and they'll try to, find themselves in. Well, that's kind of part of, trying to make sure that everybody's really taking part of it and doesn't zone out and feels like they're part of this.
It also takes a bit of practice to get it right, especially if you're getting into remote facilitation or sessions for the first time. It really just takes practice to understand when it's appropriate to start asking questions of the people that are paying attention to the session, like at a certain juncture in your activity. If you inquire with a couple of people and ask them questions specifically, that may clue people in that there may be a Q&A coming up, or that you're coming towards the end of a session where there could be a logical break. Personally, for me, my style is I don't try to necessarily enforce participation. I figure that there's enough going on somebody else's side where they're taking care of things, and that they're going to be responsible for whatever we're doing on the call. If they decide to disengage, it's probably for a fairly good reason professionally. So I just try to provide the environment where it's inclusive, and I'll inquire and make sure that we get points of view across, especially for people that are maybe a little gun shy about saying what they think and would rather do it abstractly through like a board like Miro like this. But I tend to rally everyone around maybe a couple of things that they should focus on, and make sure that people understand way in advance that, say, if we're going for an hour, there will be a logical break at the quarter to, or maybe even 10 minutes to the top, so that people can structure their attention appropriately.
Also, what incentivizes them to stay is just a stake. So if they pay money, then they better watch. And if there's any way to kind of to simulate that, you definitely get also kind of a more increased awareness. But generally, like everyone who's paying for contributing it, they listen and contribute. At least in my experience.
Yeah.
Sandy, what are your thoughts? You've been kind of silent a little bit. What are you thinking? You've been in this facilitation space a long time. You've done a lot of work in the past year with global virtual design sprints and facilitating. I mean, what are your thoughts on what's been said so far?
I think I just want to add one more tip is time boxing. So I think we need to move on. I see Ross is trying to.
Is he sweating over there? Is he like, we only got an hour. Come on.
Oh no, it's fine.
Yeah, he is.
No, we're good.
No, but yeah, I mean, it's also one tip, like time box everything, because conversations can go on forever. Things can go on forever. People will always have more ideas and never get things done. So activities, use activities to engage people, keep them having things to do so that they won't drift off and think of anything else rather than focusing on the exercise that they are doing, like giving them actual hands-on experience. And yeah, time box everything. That would be something that, yeah.
Cool. Okay, Ross, go.
So, yeah, just one more
Three, two,
thing.
one.
Yeah, one more thing that just popped into my mind as Andre was mentioning, and Robert kind of chimed in with this one as well, is intrinsic motivation is your best tool here. So what we always do, we try to make people understand that we're doing these workshops, we're doing these remote sessions for them, for the good sake of the team, the company, the product, the service, doesn't really matter. But the moment people feel invested, and in the preparation part, if you manage to kind of put in that seed of motivation and make them understand what the outcome will be, their engagement, you won't have to worry about engagement. You won't have to push them into doing something. They're inherently going to want to get towards that outcome because you kind of made that promise beforehand. So this is, I think, a really great driver that kind of, if done properly, kind of bails you out from having to call people out for being
Oh,
hey again.
No. So this is a live example of what could go wrong in a call.
Yeah,
Thank
but Rob, can you take
Marcus, and
over?
that's the problem. As Rob says, make sure you have a steady internet connection.
There they are.
All right, perfect. So we're back.
Yes.
So unfortunately, we kind of lost all the questions that we had.
No,
Hopefully, you covered them.
Yep,
Awesome.
Oh no, they're here. We've been documenting them.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect,
we're here.
perfect.
Okay, let's go to the next topic. Let's talk about communication, which I think is the overarching theme that
Yep.
makes everything super critical. I told you in the beginning, we'll call everything important in this session. So communication. Sandy, what are your thoughts? What would you say based on your experience that on the communication front is super critical?
Yeah, I think for remote facilitation in terms of communication, the word that I would use and emphasize most is over-communicate. Things can really get lost through technology, emails. It doesn't matter. You say it doesn't mean that someone can hear it. You write it doesn't mean that someone will read it. So just make sure that you over communicate. And I normally would balance it out with different types of channels. So we do active communication. So we do one-on-one. We actually have calls with them. And we also do passive communication. So things like using Slack, send them an email or just on WhatsApp groups, stuff like this. So I kind of balance that out a bit. And also sometimes I would just do like a group announcement so then people can still read them, although they are actually the same information in the end, but they are in different formats. Also, the other thing is mindful of the language. So what I mean, I'm not saying like you're swearing at people or stuff like that, but what I mean is there is actually, when we work remotely, we are more likely to work with people from a very diverse culture. So even the exact same word can mean something super different in two different countries or different cultures. So just be mindful with that and try to talk simple language. I think it's a benefit of myself because English was not my first language. So I always try to find the simplest word to explain things. And I think that kind of that's a good benefit on my side. So yeah, try to use simple language. Don't expect the whole group will have exact same language level as everyone else. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
Andre, what are your thoughts? You can chime in on this a little bit as well.
yeah, no, I 100% agree. That was a great summing it up. Because remote work is kind of enabling multicultural communication, you have to put specific attention to how you use the language. And Jason Fried, the guy behind the CEO behind Basecamp, if you're familiar with it, he started his remote kind of agency, I think 10 years ago or something. And he basically says that he hires people who are excellent writers, because he wants to make sure that everybody on the team is really succinct with the thoughts that they communicate, because the primary way that you communicate with your team will be overriding. If someone misunderstands something, that can lead to loss of information and then, you know, create difficulties. If something like that arises, which is normal on Slack or wherever in each chat, what I found super valuable in my team was as quickly as possible, like we actually created a Slack emoji, as quickly as possible to go to a private conversation or like a Zoom call, in order to really see the face, assess the voice, the tone of voice, the speed, and kind of feel what the person's actually talking about, or whether they're emotionally loaded or whether they're neutral. Because a lot of the context and where these people are, you don't know. And especially with remote work, you don't know if someone's kids are running around and stressing that person out. You don't know if they're like on the beach and actually quite relaxed. And a lot of these things, because they lose context, can mean different things. So if you misunderstand something, or you think that you misunderstand something and you feel, you know, like a little bit stressed because of it, jump to a Zoom call right away and it'll clear out. Again, like we have this like little emoji, which we just put on a message, and then it gets shut off with a bot to a different channel. And then we go through all the things that we needed to talk about on like a Monday or so. So that's quite important, I feel. Another thing that we did, especially when we started at Agile Smart, is the principle of the different kind of channels. So you have text, you have speech, and you have kind of visual communication. And sorry, I was a little bit sick. So the further to the text you get, the more information loss you kind of face. So if you want to communicate an idea, sometimes it's easy to do it by words, but it's most of the time it's best if you actually sketch it out and like show it. This is what it looks like, except for instead of talking about it and hoping that the other person will pick up your mental image. People are not mind reader, unfortunately. And so going into text is like super vague, and then trying to explain it with words is better, but then sketching it out is probably the best you can do. Yeah. You have like Miro for it.
That's super important.
No. It again. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Andrew.
No, I can add one other thing here. What's really key here is how accessible you are, especially if you're an organizer or a facilitator. It's all great to have inclusive communication and making sure people are heard, but sometimes a lot of the important conversations happen offline, or even before you get into the session. Either people want to clarify their own understanding of what's going to happen, or they have a personal issue or professional issue with what's going to happen, and they need to work it out in a different, even a different medium, or even at a different session. So what's been key for me as a facilitator is being available. And sometimes that saturates my schedule with a lot of one-on-ones, but it's absolutely necessary. It's one of those things that I've heard another facilitator say, where you're pulling the weeds out of the garden to make sure everything grows properly. And if you can take the time to actually be accessible to people and to address their issues or concerns, or even what they need to know before they get into a session, that's vital.
Yeah.
Great points, everyone.
Great point,
that was really great. I have one more, but I think it's more appropriate for the next chapter.
Yeah, I guess that coming back to what Andre mentioned, that you have to make sure that people understand exactly what you're talking about. We had so many cases in which we wrote down what we meant, but people understood completely differently. Sure. So having a visual support is super important. I guess that this will drive us into the next topic of tools. Obviously, there are so many important aspects to take into account when choosing the right tools for your remote sessions. We have a plethora of options right now, but tools should support you beyond that. So there are things that happen before your remote session. There are things that happen afterwards your remote session. Therefore, I think that it's important to understand each step, understand the level of expertise that each team member has with these tools, understand how tools communicate with each other within the organization, and most importantly, understand that there's a learning curve. I cannot stress how important this is. I've read few days ago an interesting article from Nielsen Norman Group from NNG, and they were quoting that the best tools to use are the ones that your team are already using. Personally, I agree 90% with that. I say 90% because I imagine, for example, running a more complex remote workshop in Google Slides. I think that would be near impossible, but there are great tools such as Miro or any other online canvases to help you visualize your work and provide you with all the features that you need to run these sessions. And now, Robert, coming back to you, I'm going to invite you on the virtual stage. What do you think that are the best tools out there for running remote sessions?
For communication, I always recommend Zoom, which is what we're currently using. Right now, their tech and their ability to support multiple countries is far and above what most companies offer. I know that there's WebEx, GoToMeeting, Google Hangouts. I mean, people will kind of fall back on the tools they're familiar with, to your point. But I found more often than not that Zoom's technology to handle lots of people at the same time, the ability to do breakout rooms, webinars, it tends to be more business centric. So I've fallen back on that and have used it exclusively for the past couple of years. Beyond that, again, to your point, it's going to primarily depend on what you have available, perhaps what your employer already has in the pipeline, meaning they already have a contract signed with a company to use their tools, whether it's Office 365 and all of the like Microsoft Teams and other things that they offer. So you may be kind of handcuffed to use certain tools based on your situation. However, if you have the freedom to do so and to try different things, and you are not of a person that says, I'm just going to use what I have, which is what most people do, then I recommend going out there and tasting a few things, trying them out. I mean, Sandy and I do this a lot, especially with leading up to some of the events that we do. We just try tools and see what they're about. And first impressions are a big thing. So if we find something like Yak, which is like leaving 2-minute audio messages instead of texting, really didn't work for us. And we were exploring it from the perspective of how teams can communicate with one another. Cuckoo is another kind of utility that you can use to make sure that everyone understands when they're supposed to get together. Doodle is another where you can schedule out sessions. There's tons of different things. But with all of the articles and all the resources you're going to see online, the thing I try to promote more often than not is just try it out, taste it. Because usually if one person finds it really good and really, really likes it, people that trust that person and trust their opinion are going to pay attention, and they're also going to try it. But nothing starts from just everyone doing it unless it's mandated. Try it out, see what you think. For you personally, it'll take maybe 5 minutes to 30 minutes of your time. If it sticks, great. If it doesn't, you still can fall back on the tools that you already know.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
That's a really great point, Robert. That's a really strong statement. And one other tool that we personally use a lot, like we use this for everything, for like debriefing people on the remote design sprint, scheduling sessions, sending out like any required documentation, summarizing user testing sessions. We use this for everything, literally for everything, and that is Notion. If you didn't see it, like it's good for task tracking, financial forecasting, like a spreadsheet combined with the Trello, combined with the Word, and it's really, really volatile. So that's just a personal preference of ours that we found to be super, super valuable. Yeah, and probably specifically for user testing, that just popping up in my head at the moment is Loom. It basically allows people, like you can just set up a Loom, and then you Loom, you just pop it up. You can do a screen recording, or you can record on your phone while people are talking. Someone said, what was the tool that was just mentioned? That is Notion.
Yeah, we're gonna have the full list in the Miro board.
Yeah, we're gonna have all of these resources linked. So Notion, Notion. Andre, any tools that you would like to talk about? Something, some important.
I would also agree with Robert, because tools change all the time. A lot of time, like every other month, there's something new coming up, and we usually give our team like 2 weeks to test it out. If someone suggests there's value in it, and then if the behavior sticks, we keep using it. If not, we discard it. But yeah, there's too many. Like Twist is quite interesting. We tried it out for asynchronous communication. Slack, obviously, Miro. I have an interesting thing that probably nobody of you knows, but it's called Nuriva. But it's a hardware thing. So if you're in an office, or like if you have like multi-office and remote combinations, it's basically a massive touchscreen whiteboard with a projector on it, and they have a software that's quite nice as well.
I know of it. Yep. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's the guys are amazing. I have also one of those, and I might write something up and show you, or like put a video up how it works, because it's actually super nice. But on the same note, because I forgot also earlier, I recommend not mixing in office and remote, and have every participant in a separate machine or room or headphone, because speaking with someone right next to you is easier than with someone on the internet, and so the channels get skewed a little bit. So just a kind of advice. Split it up, even if it's awkward.
Yeah, and I'll add, that's the distinction between what I call virtual connections and remote connections. Remote can be distributed teams where there's a group of people in one section, and then there's a couple of people that are remote in other parts of the world. Virtual is where you get everybody on their own screen. Everyone has their own screen, their own camera, so that everyone's on an equal playing field when it comes to connecting and sharing in the session.
Yeah. Smart glasses.
Right.
Awesome.
Okay.
The other
I
thing
love
I
it.
want
As a
to add.
facilitator, right on. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add also that sometimes it's not really about what tools you prefer to use. It's a lot of time depends on what the companies actually can access. There's security issues that they may not even allow their team members to use that tool. So that's kind of the reason I also put in the slides and those common keynotes, stuff like that. It's like, yeah, you may sometimes just have to stick with those, even though it's not your preferable tool. And also it's great to not always only think about just one tool, think of your plan B, C, D, like what if one tool fail, what other plans you can have. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. The idea of preparing for the worst case scenario, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Just to make sure that we're gonna stay on time, I guess we have 10 more minutes.
Yes, we've allocated 10 minutes for Q&A, and we've collected all the awesome questions that you folks have. So if you have more questions that maybe we've missed, or you want to add as the conversation is going, we will be
answering them in the board.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's see. Let's start with the first one.
Sure. So probably we want to share the board.
Yep. Hold on just a second. Let's share the screen so you can all see this beauty. Okay. So there we go. Perfect. Let's go through the questions one by one. How do you ensure that everybody is active doing things and not distracted with other things? How to ensure everybody talks? I think we touched this topic multiple times. Kind of how do you gauge? Kind of talked about this. Like make sure you manage expectations. Make sure you kind of check in with them and kind of as a facilitator guide everyone through the conversation. Andre had some really great points on that. Anyone want to add more on that topic?
I actually started using a pointing stick on Miro because it doesn't have the same kind of gather tool as Miro, and so I started using like a kind of a stupid looking pointy stick to get everyone to like come over to where I was, which actually works quite well. It's kind of a random thing, but it really works very well. And it's kind of funny too. You can make ones a little bit weird looking, and it actually works really well.
Did we lose our host?
Hello, we're back.
I'm not sure what.
We are back.
Robert, I love your background. Backgrounds.
How do you make that? Sure. Do you folks hear our first question? Do you hear the question, or did we disconnect right then?
First one was there, I think.
Yeah, the first one was good.
Okay, perfect. Let's move to the next one. How do you avoid awkward silences when you ask questions and nobody answers?
Pinpoint people.
That's a good one.
Point people.
Who wants to jump on this one?
You call them out by name.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
That's
Yep.
essentially it.
Like-
And that happens all the time in the sessions I have.
I just keep the momentum in a way. It's kind of an interesting question because I feel like that happens in real life as well. So do you know, like when you speak in front of people and there's like nobody's reacting to your question, you know, what are you going to do? And it's a lot, I think, about just managing the silence yourself. And you can practice that by doing comedy or just telling stories, just kind of, you know, filling out the silence, but also kind of at the same time getting aware that, you know, people seem to not give a shit. So it's better change topic. So it seems more fluent. So it seems like you know what's going on, because that's just normal. Like people will not say anything. Expect it, and they'll also agree to that.
Okay. Next one. How to moderate several breakout rooms if you are alone? Ooh, that's a tough one.
Okay.
Interesting question. Who wants to jump in?
I had okay. Sorry, Sandy, you were saying something.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you do. I talk too much already.
Okay, I just I think one trick is to assign participants to lead the room, the conversation, and then you as the facilitator just jump around to make sure each group are still doing okay in a sense.
Yeah, I was running a hackathon a couple of weeks ago alone for 3 teams, and first I kind of had a friend who was like basically moderating another group in a breakout room, but pretty quickly I figured out that breakout rooms are actually quite specific. People in these things get into conversations, and if you have points in your meeting when the conversation is fine, give them a goal, stick them into the breakout room, put the timer on like 30 minutes, and then call them back in, because that's their responsibility to finish. And so you don't need to facilitate them because that's their space. But everything else, you know, you can use your entire Zoom list, like the whole group for. At least that's kind of how it worked for me. So like all the things that just needed facilitation were all in a room just like this. And then when there was a session for, like, for instance, the sprint map or like the storyboard session, just I set a timer, gave them a goal, checked in every now and then, and they did it all on their own. I mean, it needs a bit of confidence that it'll actually work, and a little bit of planning ahead if it doesn't work. But that's what I found. If you put people in a room and then don't facilitate them, then nothing's going to happen.
Okay, that's perfect. Let's move on to the next one. I've seen this, like a lot of +1s on this. So what's the maximum amount for a remote session, or the appropriate length?
15.
This is a very
That's 15. The max. If you're solo and maybe even co-facilitating, 15's the max. Anything above that, then you're really just, it's like this medium where it's one-to-many. But if you're engaging people, I try to keep the participants anywhere from 12 to 15. Otherwise, things get really messy between trying to help out people who are stuck with their browsers getting stuck or their connection not working.
Yeah, exactly. We also have like the 12 mark, but we always have someone extra. So we end up with 13, 14, or even 15 people.
Yeah, and just for the length, just for one single session, what we do, we try to keep it under 2 hours. That's what we found is like the threshold of people's attention span and focus and actually getting work done. So like 1 hour and 30 minutes, 2 hours tops. That's what I would add here. Yeah.
But make sure you have breaks in between.
Oh, of course. So there's like a full session and like a 15-20 minute break, then like maybe another 1 hour and 30 minute session.
Yeah. So we have 2 more minutes. Let's see, one more question.
Hey, Anna, Anna, can we go over? Are we like right at 11? We got to stop.
If people are willing to do that and excuse us for this, we're happy to do that. So. Best introduction virtual warm-ups.
So yeah, my question is virtual introduction for the exercise, or just like an icebreaker to introduce yourself. Maybe we can cover both. So for example, for personal introductions, what we do, we just take one random question, and on top of it, we put the picture, the profile picture of that member. So everyone has that. And when they get on the Miro board, they just have to drag their photo and they have to answer to the surprise question that they get. This kind of breaks a bit the ice and they get more comfortable. And then when it comes to
Robert, any icebreakers or like prep sessions, kind of get people eased into the zone?
The things that have worked really well for me, and I will name drop here. Lisa Lambert is somebody that you should probably pay attention to. She does really good icebreakers. She really helped with our last events, and she knows the space very well. Lambert. But beyond that, what I tend to do as an introduction also to the tool that you're introducing people to is something similar to what we're doing right now in Miro, where instead of just kind of showing what people can do, have them drop a picture in there of their favorite vacation spot or their favorite food.
Exactly.
Have them copy and paste their LinkedIn profile into the tool so that people can network and connect with them. So you make it interactive as a way of introducing folks, but people can all relate on food and vacations. So kind of use that as a central platform for everyone to, relate to one another on a human level.
One other exercise that we found super fun when dealing with people that are working together for the first time, even people who are like typically working with each other, super fun. We asked them, try to create a character that depicts the person you were in a past life.
Yeah.
That's something really funny, and people just go crazy on that and just mix up photos and emojis and things. So that's a really sweet icebreaker that we found is super well received.
Okay,
Yeah,
next
and
question that we have. How do you ensure everyone is trained in the collaboration software? This is an excellent question. And what we do, this is mandatory for us in the preparation phase. Depending on the number of participants we have in the group, we either have one-on-ones or we have like small group sessions where we give them some exercises in the tool that we use. So to make sure that, so they're really basic actions. So for example, copy and paste a post-it, just type something into the post-it, make sure they find their own space, make sure they understand that we will have a timer. We'll try to make them understand how to use the voting feature. So something around that.
Super simple. Sandy and Andre, any thoughts on the...
Yeah, just one more thing to add.
Training.
So before doing these small training sessions, we used to put in a document all the resources that they needed, but we found that to be not as efficient as we wanted because people tend not to read instructions.
Any tutorials on running breakout rooms on Zoom? I think we covered this question, but is there like a specific tutorial that you folks know about? Andre, is there any resource that people can watch or like?
.com have a tutorial section. They just describe it step by step.
Okay.
Maybe just get a small group and try it out.
Yeah, I think trying it out is king.
Yeah, because
that
reading
link
it
there
and
will
watching
basically
it.
help you out. It'll give you an understanding of it. But if you look on Google, there's a couple of them. Just basically, how do I use Zoom video breakout rooms? And there's a couple in there you could probably do. But that's at least for people who don't know what breakout rooms are. That's a link I put in there for people to use.
Perfect. Let's see.
The next one, can you talk about
hand gestures and facial expressions?
I guess that this is super subjective.
Yeah. I mean,
first of all, if your camera is too close on your face, you cannot see if someone is moving their hands or not. If it's positioned at a lower distance, then obviously you can see the person from the top mid part to top. Yeah. If you see someone getting very close to the screen like this and looking from one side to another, then definitely that person is lost, and you may want to check in on the chat and see if they need any help. Other than that, facial expressions could be quite interesting because there are just some people that have poker faces, and it doesn't mean that they're not interested or they're lost. It just means that that's the way they stay in a conversation. So I guess this is kind of a lottery.
Yeah.
I'll give away a dirty little secret I have. Whenever I'm on a video call like this, I don't look at the video of other people. I'm concentrating more on the content. Like right now, my entire screen is basically looking at the Miro board. And it usually stays that way throughout the session, unless somebody's like, there's smoke coming from the camera and there's a fire going on at some person's location. People usually will alert me to that fact, but I don't look at cameras at all. But that's just me. I tend to figure that people's hand gestures are usually with kind of explaining themselves, but I'm just not there, so I don't read into it.
Okay.
And he's burning.
Okay, next question.
He
How do you
doesn't
deal with
care.
large
Sandy, Andre, any thoughts on dealing with large groups? You can take this one.
Robert's probably an expert on that, or like has some insight.
Well, thank you, Andre. I mean, the only thing I could say for large groups is, well, let's bracket it out. If you're taking if you're on a virtual session or a remote session, and you're dealing with anywhere from 1 to 15, that's usually a good size generally. If you're talking about 15 to 30 or 15 to 50, I always recommend getting somebody to help you, a co-facilitator or somebody that can kind of help out with handling messaging. If it's 50 plus, then you go straight to a kind of a webinar session like this, where you could still facilitate your sessions, but you have to set the expectation that you are kind of a one handling a mass of a lot of people, and put in some recommendations on how people can help themselves, as well as get some checklists together about what people can do to make sure they're ready for the session. More often than not in large groups, especially in you get the 100, 200, 300 range, people will help each other out. If there's a question that comes up, the assumption is that the person that's kind of leading the facilitation is not going to see it right away. So just like this call, you've seen in the chat that people sometimes, like somebody mentioned the OWL kind of telecommunication set, or there was another question that somebody had about, I forget, it's about networking. People will kind of fill those in for you. So depending on the size will also depend on your approach to kind of facilitating those large groups.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank
How do you make sure everyone is contributing without signaling people? Personally, I feel that there's no problem with signaling people, as long as you want to get them involved. But I'm curious to get your take on this, Andre, Sandy, Robert.
Note and vote every 20 minutes.
It
can be about anything and everything. It could be about mood. It can be about understanding things. A note and vote is a really good way of getting people's attention. Sometimes you could do it. The easier way to do it is every 30 minutes. But if you sense that people are going and they're kind of distracted and looking everywhere else, and if attention is a real concern for you, then 20-minute note and votes are really good.
Okay.
Yeah, Andre,
please, Andre.
One little thing I learned that from performing magic or comedy, because sometimes when you start performing stuff, people will just, most of the times people don't care. So, but there's two things that make people really care, and I think they're probably universal for storytelling and everything else. One of them is that basically you want to keep the person, well, you want to entertain that person, or everybody who you're talking to. You want to talk to them in a way that everything that you say you think is important, because if you think something is important, everybody else will try to understand why you think that's important, and they will also probably perceive that as something that's valuable. If not, then they'll probably just leave the room, and that's also fine. And the other thing is, you want to promise things or create big promises, but you also want to keep, you want to, how do you say it, keep them? No. Solve them? No. I forgot the
deliver on the promise. I think that's
deliver on the promise. So you want to make big promises and then deliver on them. And if you make a big promise that something good is going to happen, people will also start trying to get interested in when is it going to come? When are you finally going to reveal the thing? And then they will just naturally keep attention. It's also mentioned by, I think, Dan Brown, who was talking about writing. how he writes his stories is he creates a lot of different promises, and then he fulfills them along the way, and then he creates new ones, and that doesn't house on fire. Yeah, that maintains people's attention.
Okay.
It's a very good,
very good point. So when they do exercises, how often should the facilitator talk out loud to give them tips versus leave them in a silence doing, as you cannot feel if they are lost or not? This is a very, very good question. What we usually do, we always have the instructions written down in the board just to make sure that they have a reference. However, if we see, so for example, if we do the how might we and we see that there's a person not engaging or just struggling typing, we try to approach that person in the private chat.
I also tend to be a blabbermouth sometimes when it comes to sessions, so I have to hold myself back from over-explaining or over-communicating too much, especially when people are trying to do their work in an activity. So I'll give as much information as I can, but I usually have to be mentally aware to hold myself back so that people have time and silence to kind of think of what they're doing.
Yeah, excellent.
I think putting instruction on the template is also very useful. That's what we have been experiencing. So.
Yep.
Yeah,
it happens all. Sorry. It happens all the time with us. So, you know, we give the instructions and then we ask, so is it clear? Everyone says yes. And when they start doing it, we notice that, no, they didn't.
Yeah, this is how we iterated on our remote design sprint template. We noticed people would just ping us, let's say during the long-term goal setting, and like, oh, what's this thing all over again? Like, what do I have to do? So what we did was just like written down the entire instructions of each and every exercise of the sprint, so that
plus
people
examples.
And an example so that people can have it front and center. They don't have a chance to interrupt others who are working simply because they have everything on the screen.
Okay, and the last question, would 1 week of prep be sufficient? How do you handle a bigger project?
Nice.
We usually or typically take 1 up to 2 weeks. We don't need more than 2 weeks to handle a project. And we usually take 2 weeks because people are not always available. Usually 1 week should be sufficient because you're not trying to solve the problem during preparation. You're only trying to figure out on what component or what part of the problem you're gonna focus on. So I guess that's...
Yeah, exactly. So we kind of go for like a divide and conquer approach, depending on the challenge. And of course, you might be interested in playing around with how much prep time you need. Like if, for example, like we design custom workshops, and it's pretty hard for us to say, okay, it's just going to take a week to prepare, but it doesn't really happen that way. Depending on the challenge, we might adjust that period of time, but still being aware that, for example, in a design sprint, we don't want to do like 4 weeks of prep. It kind of defies the entire purpose of the sprint, which is to move really quickly. So that's something from our experience. Sandy, Andre, Robert, anything you'd like to add in kind of like the length of preparation?
I usually just, it really depends on the project, as you guys say. I would just go and think, what if you had to do this project alone? And if everybody who could help you was not there, would you be prepared enough to do it? And then kind of see for yourself if a week is enough, then yeah, maybe you need more, maybe you need only 1 day.
It depends on how confident you feel. I mean, you want to be able to go to a session feeling fairly confident that you understand the domain, you understand your audience, you understand your client, and you understand the work that you're trying to get, where you're trying to bring people. In effect, you're trying to make yourself feel like fully prepared for what's about to happen. And if you feel like you're 80%, then you'll just have to take that 20% in, and it may show in your session. But really what you're doing is you're trying to gain as much confidence as you can before you're presented in front of a group that you may or may not have ever seen before. And if you have that confidence, knowing that you've covered all your bases, it's going to show in your verbal and your nonverbal communication in terms of how you approach the session.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert.
Wow.
Let's go for the last one.
Last one.
Is it going to limit the various channels of communication? For example, right now we have Miro, video chat, both group and individual. Is that going to be too distracting for participants? So yeah, it kind of ties in with a different question that I've seen in the chat saying that are we using the chat in Miro or the Zoom one? So for example, for this instance, since this is a webinar and we need a lot of people and we want to record the session, we are using Zoom because it's more tailored to doing webinar types of sessions. But we personally also use the built-in conferencing feature within Miro when we do like quick workshops and like quick catch-ups, just simply because we want to reduce some of the complications of I don't have Zoom installed, or I have too many tabs open, or I have too many apps, and my computer's fan is going crazy. So as much as possible, I would say just try to keep them at a bare minimum, making sure that you have all the power that you need. Just pick the essentials.
I guess that what we want to share with you just before closing up is the resource lineup that we have here for you.
Yeah, so what we've done here and what we will be doing, even following the sessions, we've added kind of a library of resources. I've seen Brian, someone in the chat, ask about if there's a guide to remote design sprints. We have a resource that you might want to look at. It's an article we wrote on how we do remote design sprints. Feel free to check it out, along with our Miro template on doing that. A bunch of other resources like the definitive guide to facilitating remote workshops, principles for remote collaboration, the remote decision jam, deep work, which is really awesome. And I know Andre is a great supporter of that, the lightning decision jam, and as I see, the playlist to some music. And we will be adding more to this. And just to make sure that everyone is on the same page, this resource will be made available to you after the session. You're going to have view access to it, kind of review all of the topics that we talked about, the links to the tools that we mentioned, the resources, as well as the recording for this session, for you to either share it with someone or review it at a later time. And yeah, we're so happy for all of you for tuning in. Love the numbers. Go, Robert. And yeah, if anything comes up, you can reach out to us. Like we're happy to take any questions that you might have outside of what we already talked about here. The chat is blowing up.
Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you, Andre, and thank you, Sandy, for joining us.
We can continue the conversation on community.miro.com. We'll be starting a thread there, and you can chime in and ask any more questions. We know it's maybe hard to answer all of them. Our dear speakers, anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I say pay attention to each of our LinkedIns. We're probably going to be putting some follow-up information there. If we didn't answer your question beyond putting it in the Miro community, you can also reach out to us directly. I'm sure that Sandy, myself, Andre, or Roz, or Anna, any one of us will be able to answer your questions just fine.
Yeah. Also, just a quick note. Thanks, Robert. Just a quick note from me that I put in a link on a Miro template with basically a Lego for remote meetings, so you can kind of put together your own meeting structure. I'll go into detail another time, or on my LinkedIn or whatever. But the link is at the meeting Legos.
Yeah, so everyone, you will receive an email with the recording and the link to the Miro board. So that's you're going to get access to that, and you'll have access to all of those resources for your future reference, sharing with your teams, friends, companies, doesn't matter. You'll get that. So once again, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for staying and sticking with us for 17 more minutes over our initial time frame, but we hope you learned a lot. We hope we gave you some good tips and insight on doing remote work.
We still have online 74 participants. Yeah. This is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe. Go ahead and enjoy yourselves. We hope you'll enjoyed it and have an amazing day.
Bye.
And wash your hands. Take care.
Yes.
All right.
Bye.
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 Bye.